or welcome back to Lisa & Company, and thanks for joining us for our best 20 DIYs in 2020. Don't forget to check out the entire playlist with all the great creators creating their best 20 DIYs of 2020 as well. Why don't we get started? So first up today, we are making a great family favorite game. I picked up this box at the Habitat for Humanity Restore, and the first thing we're going to do is get rid of that logo on top. Next up, I took a leftover 2x3, and keep in mind a 2x3 is actually 1.5 inches by 2.5 inches. So I cut this into blocks that were 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. Sorry, that's a lot of numbers. When I'm all finished, this game will fit neatly inside this box and, like I said, become a family favorite. I'm using my Dollar Tree blade to scrape that logo off the top. My tip for you is to keep that blade fairly flat, not perpendicular to the box, and that way you won't scrape the glass. Using a mini set of screwdrivers, I am going to take off all the hardware, not try to paint around them because, you know, even though it's one of those lazy girl things I like to do, I want this box to look really good. After a quick sanding, I'm going to tape off the glass. Yes, you are seeing me tape off the glass, not scrape it off afterwards. And then I'm going to give it a coat of my white chalk paint from Rust-Oleum. Now all those little pieces of 2x3 have been sanded and I'm staining them, but I'm not. I'm just using some watered down burnt umber paint. The beauty is it dries really quickly, and I can go ahead and put my finishing touches on this in no time. And now I can take these X's and O's that I cut out on my Cricut using a Ray Dunn type font called the Skinny, and I'm just going to put those on each piece. This part was so much fun. And keep in mind, if you don't have a Cricut, you could use paint or even a paint pen to do this really quick and easy. Now I did go over and give all of these on all 6 sides a nice coat of clear Mod Podge to make them a nice finished product. Then packed them in the box and, well, there's always one, isn't there? That's DIY for you. But when all is said and done, you have a great family themed game. Now this one is the coffee bar we worked on in many parts, but today I'm just going to show you how we painted it. How about a super easy Valentine's project you could even do with the kids? I am using an IKEA pillowcase. I always make sure I wash them first. They're about $4.99 depending on where you're located. And I'm cutting out a heart just the old-fashioned way that we were taught in school out of a piece of Dollar Tree contact paper. You are simply going to peel that off, place it in the middle, and this is where the fun happens. Using white and 2 shades of pink, I am going to be making a really cool polka dot looking pillow. It almost has a Kate Spade vibe to it. Now I do have some fabric medium on hand, so I am going to be mixing that in with these, but you absolutely don't have to. Just keep in mind that if you don't use the fabric medium, you can't wash this pillow afterwards. Now, are you ready to have some fun? Because this is where you can just let your imagination run wild. I am starting with the white on my Q-tip, and then I'm going to work my way forward as I stack up the paint. But the best part is you can really be random with this. And I don't mean carefully random, I mean random. So what I did was I went much closer together where it was at the edge of the heart and then spaced them out as I went. And I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And then I went in with the pale pink, and then I went in just a little bit with the fuchsia because that was really just an accent for us. If you love peeling back paint at the end of a project, you are going to love this because this is exciting. So you can use a pin. I happen to have my Cricut tool on hand, and then very carefully peel away the contact paper, leaving a perfect, pristine edge. Isn't that pretty? Such a great accessory for Valentine's Day, or really a great technique for so many different things. How about it's time for a super simple, quick, and easy Dollar Tree DIY. This one, don't blink you guys, because we're going to be finished before you know it. All you need is one of these great bags from Dollar Tree, some greenery of your choice, whatever you've got, and I'm actually reusing a piece of floral foam. It's wet floral foam, I know, but I had it on hand, so I'm absolutely going to use it. We're going to start today by trimming off just the very top, and you've got to love that Dollar Tree has given us these easy lines to follow. I am cutting right below the stitching that holds those handles on, and then this is where it gets crazy easy. I'm not kidding you, this barely qualifies as a DIY, but here we go. We are going to take the top of this bag and we are simply going to roll down the top. That's right, we're going to roll it once, put a tiny dab of glue on it, and then we're going to roll it one more time, giving it a really pretty finished edge, but super casual at the same time. You're going to take your floral foam and place it in the bottom. No, I didn't even glue it. And then I like to take the pieces of my greenery apart simply because I feel like I can get them exactly where I want them. If you just stick them in as a complete bush and just depend on the wire to get it where you want it, I don't think you're going to get the same result. And that is just personally me speaking. And I just had a really specific idea of how I wanted this to look when I was finished. I have used this finished product in so many places all over the house, all different seasons. You could add bows to this, you could add all kinds of stuff to this, but I love how simple it is. Time to switch gears and get our power tools out. I needed a hallway table when I was renovating at my old house, and I had this old table in the garage that I had picked up at the Habitat for Humanity Restore and only used the chairs. So we are going to cut it in half. You heard me right, we are cutting this in half and making a beautiful hall console table. I started by drawing a line right down the center. Now we are going to use a couple of different tools to do this. I am going to use my Sawzall, also known as a reciprocating saw, because for the very first cut, I have to get through the top as well as the skirt that goes around the outside of the table. You can see it a little bit better here. Once I've got that cut, I am going to switch gears and I am going to use my circular saw. And there's a really great technique, if you don't already know it, where you can plunge just like this. I've set my blade in the hole, I drop my saw down, and I'm going to go the rest of the way with it. The reason I'm switching to the circular saw is it has a slightly finer blade than the reciprocating one and will give me a better cut and a nicer finish. Now enter the and company of Lisa and Company. I just wanted to teach Izzy exactly what I was doing here. I think it's so important to learn these skills when you're young. So I showed her how we were going to do the edge and make it nice and smooth, and then the top of this table was in pretty rough shape. So I'm just teaching her how to go back and forth with the wood grain to give it a nice sanding before we paint it. Back inside the house, I'm going to attach two of the legs. We're going to attach it to the wall using a couple of L brackets and some really good anchors. I want to make sure it's well and truly in there. And then we're going to paint it using the Rust-Oleum chalk paint in linen white. As is always the case, the first coat of white paint over a dark finish is a little scary. Just trust the second coat will do the trick and you'll have a beautiful finished product. This table turned out to be exactly what I needed for this small space in the hallway. How about a trash to treasure tiered tray made from a whole bunch of found objects and things I picked up at, the Habitat for Humanity Restore. To create this tray, I used 3 of these very large, heavy serving platters, a few different candlesticks, including this one wooden one, which I picked up at Michael's ages ago, of course with my 40% off coupon, and some candle cups that I'm going to use for legs. Before I start putting this together, I am going to give it a little bit of a sand using an 80 grit sandpaper. I'm going to do that for a couple of reasons. I really want to make sure that my E6000 sticks well to this shiny surface, but I also want to make sure that my paint and primer stick really well. There's no point in putting a ton of effort into a project if you're not going to start out right and do the prep work. I am going to use the good old tried and true method of using E6000 as well as hot glue for that short-term, long-term hold while I assemble this. To make sure when I glue all my pieces together and stack them up, I want to make sure that those candlesticks down the middle are right dead in the center. So I'm using my Dollar Tree square to make sure I am getting them in exactly the right spot. And again, just following through with my hot glue as well as my E6000 to make sure that everything sticks together for the long term. Once everything was assembled, I decided it needed a little something on top and used a whole bunch of different candle holders. I think one of them might be an egg cup, as well as a little candle cup at the very, very top, just to give it a little something. Now for painting. Here's something that I have learned over time. If you paint these pieces individually, it's really tough to get the glue to stick to a painted surface unless it's entirely cured, and that can take 20 to 30 days. So what I like to do is assemble everything. I took it out to my garage where I primed it with a really high adhesion primer. It's actually made by Kills and it is my absolute favorite. And then I am using my Rust-Oleum chalk paint in Country Gray to give this a beautiful finish. Now, I will admit that it's a tiny bit more work when you're painting something that's assembled. It would have been easier to do it this way. And for once, I don't have a lazy girl tip for you. It is what it is. Put on some good tunes or something good on Netflix and paint away. So I figure we could stop here with the finished product, or I thought just for fun we could style it up with all kinds of found objects and previous DIYs, including, do you see that Dollar Tree buffalo plaid bag? What a great backdrop that makes. Let's style this up, you guys. all styled up and sitting pretty on the coffee bar. One of my favorite things to do is take an old piece of furniture and show it some love again. This was a restore piece I picked up for $50. It had the most gorgeous handles, but boy was she in bad shape. I got my inspiration from Restoration Hardware to create this almost zinc looking finish, and I did that using Fusion Mineral Paint and white wax. This poor piece has been covered with Dollar Tree rugs for months because I just couldn't pick exactly what I wanted to look like. I have tried no less than 3 colors on this piece. You can see a couple of the different green ones here because I just couldn't decide what I wanted this piece to look like until I saw that one in the Restoration Hardware catalog. Now I am going to sand down some of the paint on here just because it's got a little bit of texture, but I am not going to sand this dresser completely smooth for the simple reason that with the white wax going on top, some of these imperfections are going to look really cool when I'm finished. I finally settled on ash. It's a really dark charcoal gray made by Fusion Mineral Paints right here in Canada, and I am going to be using their white wax to finish it off. Now, I love this paint. If you haven't used it before, I highly recommend it. There's a couple of things you should know. You don't want to overbrush with this paint because it is a self-leveling paint, and the more you brush it, the less opportunity you're giving it to level out. By self-leveling, that means that you're not going to get brush strokes if, that's right, and only if you don't overbrush it. When it comes to adding the wax, you just want to wait overnight so your paint can dry. It doesn't have to be completely cured, and I just dip it in and rub. And really, this is the hardest part, just making sure you get a nice even coat right across the piece. And then you can always go back and buff it a little bit, but I find the heat from the brush going back and forth does a beautiful job of creating a great finish with this wax. Can you tell I'm kind of excited about it? So I'm reusing the handles exactly where they were because I thought they were so pretty. And especially once I had this new finish on, those handles were perfect. My trash to treasure is no longer anything trash and totally treasure. I like to think that these pieces, solid wood pieces that you can pick up at your restore or any other thrift store, are a great addition to any home. And sitting here at my coffee bar, it is exactly the finishing touch I've been waiting for. What's that? You want to make another trash to treasure 2-tiered tray? Well, all right then. Nothing I love more than finding a few parts and pieces at my local thrift store and turning them into something beautiful. Now that one I just showed you was something that I had made out of a super skinny little candlestick and a silver plate, and I thought it was so pretty just the way it was. However, once I found these wooden plates at my local thrift store, I knew that that was going to be a perfect part for this. Now, it's much harder to find the center of a round tray, and you guys, if you have any tips, hit those comments down below and let me know how you do it. I am going to attach this using some E6000 and of course some hot glue so I get that instant hold. And I'm going to use my tape measure and my Dollar Tree square to make sure that I do actually have this in the center. We're going to repeat the process to put the second level on, and I love that piece, and it's going to give me a little bit more stability when I'm attaching that second tray. Now, to tone down that orange a little bit, I am just going to dry brush a small amount of my linen white chalk paint on here. Now, as you watch me do this, notice that I still haven't reloaded my brush. I am literally using that first little bit that I picked up and tapped off just a little bit. I don't want to cover this. I don't want it completely painted. I just really want to tone down the orange, but I still want to see that wood grain coming through. Now, I like to keep it real with you guys, so here you go. This is as real as it gets. I'm going to start painting the lower level, and yeah, well, I'm not the most patient person in the world, and I guess I didn't wait long enough for that to cure as well as it should have. So, yep, back to the E6000, and I'm actually going to leave this one overnight to make sure it's completely cured. You'll notice that I didn't use any hot glue for that one. I am so thrilled with the way this was finished. I used all sorts of little bits and pieces I had lying around. Love those moss stones from the Dollar Tree and can't wait to see if they come out with those again. And you can see she's perched right here on my coffee bar. In that very same thrift store haul, I found these cool candle holders and they were 50 off that day. You gotta love a good sale. So just like pretty much everything else that stands still long enough, I gave these a coat of my linen white chalk paint by Rust-Oleum, and then I'm gonna do kind of a fun finish. This was the first time I'd ever tried it, and let me tell you, I was kind of hooked on it after that. So I mixed up a tiny bit of the gray paint, and well, I was attempting to splatter it, and I didn't like the way that worked out. So another coat of chalk paint to the rescue, and this time a much drier brush. And it actually felt like a little kid back in school just flicking away with that paint. Now I'm going to use my Dollar Tree stickers, and this was the best part. Make sure you line it up so that your letters are level. Now on that center one, I made a tiny little wreath out of some diorama flowers, and I love this. Can I tell you guys, I thought this was some really fun spring decor, and I did use it that way. And then you know what? I pulled it out this past Christmas, and I had that in a couple of different places in my house. Just absolutely love it. Doesn't that scream farmhouse? So I pick up these pieces of window trim from the Habitat for Humanity Restore, and I use them upside down because that makes them wider on the bottom, and they make for a great standing sign. Now they do come in primed MDF, which makes it super easy to throw on one coat of my chalk paint. And just like the technique you saw in the previous DIY, I am going to give it a little bit of a speckle. This time I'm doing it in a slightly lighter gray because I'm going for super subtle here. But like I said in the last DIY, this is so much fun. I love that sort of, almost gives it an aged farmhouse look without being that chippy finish. Now here's my tip, you guys. You want to make sure that you use a much bigger piece of paper than I did because this paint goes everywhere. I kid you not, my iPad was just off screen there and my iPad was covered in lovely gray specks. All I did to finish it off was add my galvanized welcome letters from the Dollar Tree, and this one was done. I don't know if it gets much easier than that. I think I have one more that's even simpler. I have this trio of Restore doors, and we are going to have some fun with these today. The wooden one on the left, we're going to leave pretty much like it is and just create some great storage on it and a place for some fun decor, pretty much anywhere in your home that you can change out seasonally. And the second one we're going to work on today is going to create a chalkboard for the hallway. I picked up these great fabric lined baskets from my dollar store, and I figure I can use these either way. For today's project, I'm going to take out the liner and just use the black chicken wire basket the way it came. We're going to attach these to this door using, I don't even know what to call them. It's a hardware piece that I picked up at the dollar store, and we're going to go ahead and spray them black so that they match. These are going to perfectly hold those baskets in place. I'm going to mark the location I want to hang these so I can figure out exactly what I want them to do, and then I'm going to attach them using the screws that actually came with the hardware. I will tell you I had to bend these hooks a little bit just to make them tighter and pinch a little bit better onto that basket, but I don't think they minded. They didn't make much of a fuss. Once those baskets were attached, it was really just a question of finding the right accessories and the right spot for this to fit in my home. I ended up putting it against the pantry in the kitchen. That's just around the corner from the coffee bar, and just filled it with a few accessories. Believe it or not, most of those came from Dollar Tree or were previous DIY projects, and I love it. Couldn't wait to finish this one and change it out for the seasons as we go. Now, this one is a bifold door that started off life as someone's closet. It was slightly damaged, but you can't tell because I made sure that was around the back. So I have used the natural line on it and taped it off. Here is the best tip in the world that I could offer you guys. I have already painted this in my white chalk paint. So what you're gonna do is use a pretty dry brush and go around and paint right up against that tape. This is what happens. Any paint that is going to seep underneath that painter's tape is the same color as the base coat. Now when I go over this with my black chalkboard paint, nothing's going to get underneath because that tape has been completely sealed by the white paint. Pretty cool, huh? Now, as if that wasn't good enough, this gets even better. Don't be hosed by all those brands who profess to have chalkboard paint. You know why? Chalkboard paint is just flat black paint. So this is a black paint that I had kicking around in my stash. There's absolutely nothing special about it. Now, don't use acrylic craft paint. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about pretty much any wall or just about any other paint. It is flat black. I put it on thinly with a roller. I do 2 to 3 coats depending on what's required, and I do sand a little bit in between. I've created this little cutout on my Cricut, but you could do this so many ways using Dollar Tree stickers or just painting it on if you're good at that. I'm not, so I am going to use my Cricut to put this up on top. I was going for something really simple, and I gotta tell you, I love the way this came out. I used a typewriter font. I apologize for not being able to give you guys that one this time, but I'll post the actual video down below because I'm pretty sure I talk about it in there. I love the way this came out. It was super simple, super graphic, and I love the farmhouse nature it kind of lent to the hallway. Now I love me a good tape pulling paint reveal, especially when there is zero bleeding. I love the way this came out, and I love the fact that I didn't have to go back and touch up any of those edges. You guys, I guarantee you, try this out using your base coat as a sealer for the tape edge, and you'll be really glad you did. When Easter rolled around, it was time to take a whole bunch of great dollar store pieces and turn them into some great Easter holiday decor. Kind of like these bunnies, which I had every intention of painting, but they were so cute, I almost used them the way they were. However, spray paint won, and we went down to the basement and gave them several light coats of this Rust-Oleum paint. Once those bunnies were dry, I had an idea that I had no idea would work. I wanted to turn these bunnies into topiary bunnies. Yep, which meant putting a stick, well, you get the idea. So I wanted to start with some E6000, but I also knew I was going to need a whole bunch of something in there to make it work. Well, what worked was the E6000, started out with a little bit of hot glue, and then went nuts We added a ton of hot glue to make sure they stayed in. Once I knew those bunnies were dry and everything was working, we put them in a couple of cute stainless pots we had in the old stash and covered them with Spanish moss. I felt like they needed just a little something, so we made a tiny little wreath for around their neck and added a beautiful little white rose. I just love the way these came out, and believe it or not, they've held up even though they've been packed away. I can't wait to have them out for Easter this year. We are going to make an Easter bunny wreath out of some unlikely materials. So we started with a wreath form from the dollar store, and then these two candle holders that I had thrifted several months ago. I thought they looked like bunny ears when we talked about it in one of the thrift hauls. So you know what? We are turning them into bunny ears. We're going to cover this wreath entirely in the dollar store Spanish moss, giving it a really nice, fresh green look. And be smarter than me, wear your finger protectors when you're using hot glue for something like this, because it does peek through the Spanish moss and it burns. Step is to add the ears, or candle holders, depending on how you look at them. So we have cut off the bottom, and look what we discovered when we flipped them over, that they were made in Canada. I just love it when you find good quality stuff at the thrift store. We're going to glue these on the back and hope for the absolute best. First things first, we're going to use some E6000, and then we're going to use a whole bunch of hot glue. There's not a lot of surface area for these to stick to, and we really want them to stay in place for the entire holiday. Now, although I want to keep this fairly modern and simple, I do think it needs just a little something up here. So I have these pieces I picked up at the dollar store, and we're simply going to put half of them on one side and half on the other and hope that they look Easter bunny-ish without looking too Easter bunny-ish, if you follow what I'm saying. One more touch. Could it be a burlap bow or maybe black and white ribbon of some kind? I have a whole bunch of different ones. I do know, however, that I want it to be simple, so let's see what we went with. And isn't he handsome? I just love the way he came out and can't wait to have him back for Easter in 2021. all these bits and pieces, we are going to create a really great raised pedestal bowl. Well, I picked up this great bowl at the Habitat for Humanity Restore for only $1. So not only was it a great score, it had this beautiful scalloped edge, and it was exactly what I had been looking for a project I wanted to do. Now, I have a whole bunch of different candlesticks that are going to make up the bottom, some of them from Michael's, Dollar Tree, thrift stores, kind of all over the place. I tend to pick them up whenever I see them because, well, candlesticks, you can use them for so many projects. Well, it turned out to be this one, and anytime I'm going to paint something glass or ceramic, I like to use this 100% acetone nail polish remover to give it a really good wipe down. I am also going to prime this entire thing, but first things first, I like to glue things together to their natural surfaces before I paint. It is a little bit more work because I have to wait for that glue to set up, but I think it's absolutely worth it for a great end product. Down to the basement we go to give this a really thin coat of high adhesion primer. I love the way it sticks to glass, I love the way it blocks any stains, and it's an absolute necessity in my opinion. Once that was dry, we did go ahead and give it a coat of a pale gray spray paint. I have a couple of cans kicking around. To create this galvanized finish, we're going to use several different colors of silver. Now, this is the same stuff I used on my coffee bar wall, and my supplies are getting a little bit low. That's why I did the base coat in that pale gray. This is going to help me get started a little faster than normal. Now, I am following the tutorial from the Latina next door. It's the best one in my opinion, and I've used it a few times. You can't go wrong. Now, I did go ahead and DIY a few things to go inside this pedestal. Isn't she a beauty? I'm going to make sure I link the entire video down below so you can see all those other DIYs that we did as part of this. I love it when I can create great home decor from absolutely nothing. I had a few different inspiration pieces for this one, but I was determined that I was going to turn my Starbucks iced coffee bottles into some serious home decor. Now, it's safe to say that not all trash is created equal, but because of the way these bottles are manufactured, I was able to cut them down to several different sizes just by using those ribs right on the bottles as my guidelines, and watch how easily they come together into 3 different sizes. time to head down to the basement and give these a coat of, you guessed it, my favorite high adhesion primer by Kills. You guys, don't skip this step. I know most of the chalk paints will stick to plastic, but do you really want to do all this hard work and then find out that it didn't? This uses so little of the bottle, I just can't stress enough, go for it. Then I went ahead and painted them with just this simple flat white. I call it Farmhouse white because it seems absolutely perfect anytime I need a good white. And just because of the way I wanted these to have a really smooth finish on it, I decided to go for the spray paint instead of having chalk paint and brush marks. Before I could paint the lids, I had to fill in the Starbucks logo. I did that using a little bit of drywall compound, and I'm going to end up doing it twice. I've filled it, I've sanded it, and then I'm going to go over it one more time with a really thin coat. I just didn't want it to show at all on the finished product. After that, it was time to head for the basement one more time and spray paint those lids. Now, I figure the best part about a project like this is you really can't go wrong. So I started out by just painting the first rib. Then I moved on, then I decided to add some trims, and I really just let my imagination go crazy. I didn't want to be too predictable and do it all the same, so I just changed it up a little bit. So this one has two painted and then has one whole section wrapped in twine, while the small one just got a couple of rows of the twine. A few pieces from your recycling box, some stuff you have in your stash like paint and twine, and before you know it, you have a beautiful home decor piece you can use every season. Take a couple of these Dollar Tree box frames and turn them into a really attractive home decor shelf. Now, I completely sanded mine to get all of the paper off entirely. I didn't want anything marring this finish. So I have left my upright piece with its sawtooth hanger, and I am going to glue this to the same size right at the back here. Again, we're going to use a combination of E6000 and hot glue because we want the instant hold as well as the permanent hold. There are so many ways you could finish this off. I decided to paint mine entirely in Rust-Oleum linen white chalk paint, and then I'm adding this inspirational quote I had in a whole book of these. Once that was all attached and I only used a glue stick to do it, I did go over it with a coat of Mod Podge, the entire frame, not just the paper, so that I could make sure it had a great finish all over. I love using Dollar Tree box frames, and this was from a video of a whole bunch of different ways you could make easy, inexpensive home decor using all the different sizes of Dollar Tree box frames. I'll make sure to link that down below so you can check out the entire video. When it was time to create a fun Christmas in July project, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to create what was essentially a double-sided sign with these great blocks and some Dollar Tree stickers. I had picked up these great 4x4-inch fence posts when roaming around my new neighborhood, and I knew there were so many projects we could do with these. The best part was they had already been stained black, so I was halfway there with this project. What I did was cut these into actual square blocks. Now a 4x4 is actually 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So when I was cutting the length, I made sure to cut that 3.5 inches as well, giving me a perfect cube. After they were cut, I did spend quite a bit of time sanding them to make sure that they had a nice smooth edge. These are, after all, fence posts that have been outside for a long time, and we're bringing them in to use them as home decor. So there's rustic and then there's serious splinters. Since I don't enjoy splinters, I sanded and sanded and sanded these. After that was finished, I just used some of the black acrylic paint from Dollar Tree to paint each end and make it blend. If there were places on the blocks that were really worn, then I would go back and add a little bit of black just with a dry brush to make sure I had a nice coat and a nice base color to work with. My next step was to add my Dollar Tree stickers to create 2 words, and I was using opposite sides of the blocks to do this. Did you notice up at the top of the video? Well, what we were after was Merry Christmas on one side, and the other side, Let the Sun Shine. I mean, it was July after all. Was to apply a heavy dry brush in white, and again we are just using the Dollar Tree craft paint, and it does a great job on anything wood. Now you'll notice that I went over and over a few times. I really wanted to make sure that when we took off that sticker, our letter was going to be well defined. So this is one of those things you're best off to just plunk yourself down in front of some Netflix and paint away. Peeling the stickers off is always one of my favorite parts, and this one did not disappoint. And our finished project is Merry Christmas for the holidays that we'll see in a few short months, but in the meantime, we have a beautiful sign that says, Let the Sun Shine. And I can't think of a better way to welcome people into my home in the summer. This ugly duckling is going to be completely the opposite when we are finished with her. I ran into her at a thrift store and I just knew she screamed beautiful vintage farmhouse truck. But she needed a little work before we could get started. So first things first, I had to dismantle some of these parts. There is a lot of texture in that paint, and we're going to use our handy Dollar Tree sanding block to get rid of all of that. We won't be able to see the picture when we repaint it, but I don't want that texture coming through our fresh coat of paint. She needed a little table saw renovation to help shorten the bed on the back of the truck. That was the only way I was going to make her look like the vintage truck we were looking for. Quick spray spray down in my favorite primer to both block the colors as well as make sure that I've gotten rid of all of that shiny finish. Now, the worst part about this one was painting these wheels. There was so much more detail than I anticipated. Let's just say it required a few good tunes to get me through this part. Fresh coat of paint in the Rust-Oleum white chalk paint, I'm going to go through and add a whole bunch of details. But first, I've got to use this tiny brush to get into all these tiny parts that I didn't even know were there. This took a little longer than I expected. My Sharpie paint pen, I just went along and added some detail to each of the edges. The best part is this truck needed a name and you guys helped me out with that. Next up, we're going to use these Dollar Tree transfers to create a logo on the side and add a few details. And just like that, our Lisa and Company truck was all set for fall and to hit the road. Collection of Dollar Tree wooden pieces came together in a beautiful wintry diorama. First things first, you're going to go through and repaint everything white. I created a small door for mine. I just felt like it needed a little bit more texture, and then I'm very quickly using Jenga blocks going to get this all attached together. Now, I used hot glue mainly because these pieces are all so small and so light, but if you were worried about it sticking around long term, then you could use some E6000 as well. I just love when an idea comes together, and bit by bit I had been collecting these pieces from Dollar Tree. Wasn't sure what I was going to do with that gingerbread house, but I know I didn't want it to be a gingerbread house. You guys, I am so thrilled with the way this came together, and I recently saw one very similar in a high-end boutique that was $92. So I'm going to say that my less than $10 diorama was quite the steal. Hey you guys, thanks for stopping by Lisa and Company today, and thanks for celebrating our top 20 DIYs of 2020. We are excited for 2021 and lots of great projects, so make sure you've hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks again, you guys. Happy New Year!